This video is meant really just to give a few tips and pointers on dimensioning things, on angles, rotated items, that sort of thing. Things that aren't necessarily something you're going to do every day, possibly, but when they are done, need to look correct. This little object obviously has some holes in it. It has radiuses, diameters. It has some angles we're going to have to deal with. And so it'll help us look at a few different things. The first thing we're going to look at is just putting in the center marks for these holes, because if we have holes, we need to have center marks. Remember, you can get to that by going to the Annotate tab, dropping down the Dimensions panel, and right here we have the center mark tool. And we can just use that by clicking it and then clicking the circle that we want to put the center mark in. Every time you use it, you're going to need to restart the command, and you can do that just by right clicking your mouse. So we can quickly get those center marks in. Now the problem is when we start to dimension these, we're going to see that these three, top right, top left, bottom left, they're okay because the center marks, the way they line up, they're at right angles to each other. These are all going to be dimensioned off of the center point of this top circle, and so when we pull our dimensions off of these, we need them to line up. We need them to be at the correct angle of the dimension itself. And we're going to look at that and how that would work. Now remember, while we're here, if I wanted to have center marks that had lines coming off of it, remember that is taken care of inside the dimension style itself. Go to Modify, Symbols and Arrows. This is where we control our center marks. So if I wanted the center mark over here with lines coming off of every side, I would have to make sure that this option, this radio button for line, is selected. Then I would get lines off of that center mark. In this case, we may not necessarily want that, but if you did, that's how you would get it in there. So if I made that change now, it's not going to change my current ones, but if I were to select this or erase that one and then go back and do the center mark tool again, now I'd have a center mark with lines coming off of every side, which in that case may be something I wanted. I'm actually going to get rid of these two, and you can see with that center mark tool again, all it does is create a series of lines. These are all separate lines that are created automatically for you. So it's not a block or it's not anything that's connected, it's just a bunch of lines. So I'm going to use this as my base, and then we're going to kind of work through how you would go about doing this. Anytime I have like these two holes at the top horizontally, these two vertically, that line up, I really want to have a center line between the two center points to show that yes, in fact, they do line up. So in this case, what I can do, since I've already got these two lines over here to the left and to the top, I can just take and copy these, make sure Orthozone so you know they're perfectly straight, bring it down. Actually, I could have left, let me just do that, could have left the other lines there instead of deleting them and just use those. And then what I want to do is just basically just take that grip, make sure Orthozone, and elongate it, make sure it doesn't, it doesn't touch the circle here, but it doesn't touch that end point. Just bring it right inside of that circle like that. And that's just to let the viewer know that all of these holes do in fact line up with each other. The center point of this lines up with the center point of that, and this one. So these are all lined up with each other. You can leave it as a solid line. In some cases, people will ask you to change that actually to a center line, such as that. So we have no doubt of what's going on right there. Either way, it's fine. I'm just going to leave it like that for the time being. Now, from this, our issue is we're going to be dimensioning from this as a base point, baseline, the angles of where all these holes are located. And so the first one actually is going to be a linear dimension, and it's just going to come off of the center of this hole over to the outside edge of this little plate and show what this linear distance is. Now, small things, but they're important. I don't want to pick the midpoint of the lines or the center point of the hole as my base point for my first dimension. And the reason is because if I choose that, then come choose this endpoint, and I'm going to pull this dimension down here. What's happened is, since I've chosen the midpoint or the center point, my extension line starts right here, which leaves me no gap. I want a gap between the center mark and the line that's connected to it or lining up with it. And so when I pick that first, extension line, I want to pick the end right here of the center mark line. So that way when I come off, pull this here, I've got that gap. It's automatically created for me. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and change the precision on these so I don't eat up so much room with my dimensions. Okay, one other thing I just noticed, I'm going to take off what am I doing? I'm going to take off the leading zeros so that this 0.5 becomes just 0.5, so it's going to allow me a little more room there. But that's how I'd want to pull my dimensions when I'm dealing with a center mark. So then the next one we're going to do is actually coming off of this as a baseline and then showing, okay, well, what angle is this sitting at based on this being the center point that we're worried about. So what I would do would be use an angular dimension. Okay, I could select this as my first line because we have to choose lines for angular dimensions. But the problem is, you can see this is also straight up and down. This is also horizontal. So when I do that, it's going to tell me that the lines are parallel down here. I can't get an angle on a parallel line at 0. So what that means is these center marks have to be rotated to be whatever angle that they need to be. In our case, we're starting here. This one's rotated at 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 45, and 60. So what you would literally have to do is come in, use the rotate command, select that center mark, find the midpoint, and rotate it at 15 degrees to where it's now sitting at 15 degrees. Take this one, base point would be the midpoint, rotate it at 30 degrees. And you would literally have to go through every one of the center marks and rotate it to the angle that it's sitting at and the angle that the dimension needs to list. Okay, so 15, 30, 45, 60. They just rotated the center mark from its original position, 15, 30 degrees, 45, and 60. So now when I pull an angular dimension from this vertical point of this center mark to this vertical, so I say it's vertical, it's the vertical element of the center mark. Now I'm going to get that 15 degree dimension that I need. I'm going to pull it down here. The reason I'm doing that is because my errors are disappearing on me because of the size of them. I'm going to change the text height and arrowhead size and see if that'll help me out a little bit. Oh yeah. So now I'm going to pull this in here and I'm going to pull this one up to where they meet. Okay. And that's one way to do it. And remember, there's all sorts of options. You can see this arrowhead and this little line coming off of the dimension line are not working very well. So what I can do is choose that dimension, go find the lines and arrows, and since this was my first pick when I created this 0.5 dimension, this would be extension line 1, so this would be my arrowhead 1. So I can take that arrowhead over here and just scroll down and choose none, and it'll take that arrowhead on this side away. And so now it's a clean, it's just showing the arrow from this angular dimension coming in, so I don't have those competing arrowheads right there. So that's one way you can alleviate some of your problems, is to take this dimension, and I just chose that arrow 1 and said, hey, I don't want an arrowhead right over there off of my first extension line. So it just cleans it up. So that would be your first angular dimension. You do the next one, you come back to this as your first click, first extension line. Second extension line will come off of this, pull it down, and again, see we're we're creating it to where we have gaps here, gaps between here and the center marks, so it looks nice and neat. So first click, second click, pull it down, repeat, first click, second click, pull it down. So now I've got all these nice angular dimensions, using this as a baseline and coming off of that. And again, since I've picked the same line for all of these angular dimensions, every one of these angular dimensions have a grip in common right here at this first line. Okay. So, and actually, you can see it actually has two grips. If I move it, you can see that top one is going to actually change the angle that extension line is sitting at, and that bottom one is just going to move it up and down. But that's just the way they're created. And so that's how you would take care of everything being on an angle. You have to rotate the center marks and then use that vertical element of the center mark to actually be the choice for the angular dimensions.